Any and all expressed, shared, or implied suggestions, opinions, actions, jokes, discussions, or points of view shared on the Indigenous 21 podcast are our own, hosts and guests alike, and strictly for entertainment purposes only. They do not represent opinions or beliefs on any background groups we might identify with, such as family, village, clan, tribe, gender, age, ethnicity, race, religion, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, education, or career professions. Content shared on the Indigenous 21 podcast can and may be emotional or thought-provoking, and as such, may contain controversial subject matter. While it is not our intent to create environments that will cause harm to our audience, we advise that you feel free to stop listening at any time, as these controversial subjects will continue for any given length of time. We believe in making the Indigenous 21 podcast to be a safe space for open, honest dialogue and/or discussions about any given subject as they arise from our hosts, guests, and audience commentary. Discussions, information, opinions, or suggestions shared on the Indigenous 21 podcast should not be acted, attempted, or relied upon as professional guidance or advice.
Welcome to it's weird because our faces are here, but yet the camera's like right there. Okay, so we still looking straight forward.
Yeah.
But I have my monitor situated. It's like off center. So welcome to the Indigenous 21 podcast, where we discuss modern Native narratives
in the 21st century.
Yeah. And I am one of your hosts, Sami Vaya Yon Hope Matewa, but you can call me JD.
Hi, I'm his sister, Nikki Vinci and Matewa, but you can call me DeeDee.
And we are both from the Hopi Nation. So we started this podcast a while ago just as kind of like a safe, just Native talk space. Let's talk Native, because we do live in the city. We live in Southern Arizona in Tucson. We've been down here for over a decade. Yeah. So we wanted to set up a project where, how could we connect with other Native people? Because we are both very busy within our careers. And we want to discuss, I know there's a lot of, modern issues that are taking place in Indian country. So we just wanted to have a platform to discuss these things.
Yeah, and basically, my brother and I's upbringing, we've always been encouraged to be involved in the community. And when we were growing up on the Hopi reservation for our formative years, that was pretty much the culture. You get involved, you contribute to the community, and being down here in the urban setting, we wanted to keep that going because that's just basically how we were raised, how we were brought up. Networking out to other Indigenous people who are that come from different tribes and nations. We just wanted to create that safe space of creating dialogue, maybe bringing up issues that aren't usually talked in the forefront in mainstream media. We just wanted to reach out and put our Native American stories to the forefront.
If you're just tuning in and this is your first time listening to us, we've done 4 episodes already. I think our last episode that we uploaded regarding social justice for Native women, that was a really powerful discussion, I think, in terms of just provoking some thoughts like, oh yeah, I never considered that, or oh, there's another perspective I haven't really thought of. And before that, we did interview 2 Native educators who were experiencing, I offered my own experiences too, as well as a support staff for a middle school, and just what the education process is like for us going through COVID and the struggles within that. So going back to the discussion of COVID and education, we had you talk about your experiences in terms of how you felt allowing my nephew, your son, go back to school under these new conditions. And it's been the first week. We're at the end of the first week where we've had kids back on our campuses now within our school district. So how do you feel now that he's gone through, this first week of actually going on campus and being around other kids?
I still feel like I was strong-armed into having him go back onto campus.
So basically how our campuses are running now, we essentially have split up our student body into 2 different cohort groups. Cohort 1 attends classes on campus on Mondays and Thursdays. Cohort 2 attends classes on campus Tuesdays and Fridays. How we've done it on my campus is that we have set up basically just one-way street hallways. So in order to get to your class. In previous years, you'd be able to, walk through whatever hall you'd have to, and what would be the shortest route for you, what would be more convenient for you to get to your next class. Now we're telling people you have to follow this pathway that we set, and sometimes it's like you have to go through 2 other hallways, you have to go through 2 flights of stairs, all the way around in order to get to your class. That's literally just down the hall. You have to go all the way around the whole campus.
And not only that, but the school had to sign a waiver. I can't find the form right now. What the form stipulated is that the only way for our students to go back on, well, first of all, the hybrid learning model was the only way. For this particular district, there is an online academy that students can choose to do full time. However, because again, if you didn't watch the previous program, in terms of my son's particular education circumstances, he's enrolled into a program called the Cambridge Academy. It's his educational goals to hopefully be able to transition over to take college courses by the time he's a junior or a senior in high school. When the notification came out and we were given less than a week's notification of having to decide if I was going to have to disenroll him from the high school that he's currently enrolled in and then re-enroll him into the online academy. That notification came out just that Monday or Tuesday,
like literally a week before
we had before there was the deadline to enroll them into the online academy. And already I was upset because that time frame wasn't enough to gather enough information
and to really contemplate.
Yeah, especially if you're going to be really involved, in making these decisions and
it's having to affect your kid's future.
Right, and having to consider the impacts. I mean, I personally, I already had anxiety of having him go back onto campus, and I was already adamant on not having him go back to campus, and I was all for the online academy, but then I had to call the school and ask them if the Cambridge Academy, the program, was still going to be offered through the online program. I had to message his financial counselor, the Cambridge coordinator, and then as well as include, all of the administrative staff, principal, assistant principal, and all that. The response back was that the Cambridge program wasn't offered through the online academy and that he would just have to go through a whole different new set of enrollment, get a whole new set of class courses. Maybe they would be able to supplement his Cambridge learning.
We have over 20 schools. Within all the different high schools, this is the only campus that did allow this program, that did have this program for students to enroll in. And it's not being offered anywhere. The situation was that if you decided that you wanted to keep your student off campus and still stay online, you had to disenroll your student from the campus that they were going to school at and already going to online classes at, because we were opening up our classrooms again. There's going to be no exceptions to no, we can't have kids just stay home. So if you want to stay home and not come to campus, that is your choice. However, you have to unenroll with our campus and enroll with our online academy. So that was the number one thing you were going over.
Right. And my son's input weighed heavily in this because it is his educational career. He set these specific goals for himself. So I had to take that into consideration and then just really fight with my anxiety of allowing him back on campus. On top of that, being forced to sign the waiver that the school district will not take any accountability if he was to contract COVID-19. That part I felt a bit betrayed by his school. And I know it's not coming specifically from his high school. I know it's not specifically coming from his school district even.
Really didn't want to do, but you had no other choice because not complying with those stipulations, ultimately, again, it goes back to putting your son's education into jeopardy, which then again has a domino effect onto, okay, so what's going to happen to his future? What's going to happen to his credits, So, and that's one thing that I know that some of us have had to consider. I know that on the res schools, they started pretty late. Like they usually start in August, at least where we're from. They usually start in either in the beginning or middle of August, but this year they decided to wait a whole month. An extra month in order to actually open their schools. And coming from a rural area, I know that there really isn't adequate access to internet. And
Yeah.
even if you do have internet, it's not an adequate connection because the streaming
Yes.
takes up so much
Data.
bandwidth. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we also mentioned in a previous episode how we are fortunate enough that you do work at home.
I do.
And you have been working home since the beginning of this year, before this was even a thing.
Before the pandemic
So we
hit.
do have the adequate, the infrastructure set up here in order for us to do our thing.
Yeah, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to afford to buy my son his device so where he can learn from home and, like you said, and afford those higher internet packages. But still, at the same time, just because I can afford those two things,
what is it? What are we depriving our students of if we're not giving them this experience versus the other? Talking about either the online experience, strictly online, versus in-person learning, where if you go to the online academy, there is no, another thing that your boy was interested in and that he has taken in the past was musical theater.
Yeah.
Some people take sports.
True.
There's physical education, all of that stuff that is offered that is not available if you go with the online option. There's no art, there's no music.
And I understand that, but there are ways to participate in those while we're social distancing.
How?
And they have Zoom. I've seen so many other celebrities put on benefit concerts virtually where they're able to create and record their own music sessions, and then they submit that to somebody else who then puts the whole production together. And I get that it's not in real time. I get that it's not, that's the same as
playing in person with someone
else.
else.
Right. However, you still have to consider the times that we're in. We're not over the pandemic yet. It's not. There's no vaccination for it, even though there's talks of it.
That just got halted.
Right.
In the time we're recording this.
Right.
Now. They were in production.
Yeah.
And
So
there was
you're
a pause
talking
on it.
about having me consider online learning versus the in-person learning or on-campus learning. And normally, yeah, of course, I would be able to be more lenient on it or see the other side of it if we weren't in a pandemic. But we are in a pandemic still. We're not over it. And
so you're saying the option isn't there?
No.
From your standpoint.
In a realistic, and if we're thinking about people as a whole and not contracting, subjecting not only the students, but also the students to bring back possible carriers of of COVID-19 back to their homes, to where maybe, especially in indigenous, homes and other communities of color households where we have, multi-generational homes where you have elders living in the house. You have, I don't know how many siblings, and we're not all fortunate enough to have our own rooms. We don't have the affordability to be able to isolate somebody.
I will say
they
this.
Contract the virus.
I will say this, though, that we have had comments, because I do have a colleague who, because, she is immunocompromised. She has, is diagnosed with diabetes.
Right.
So her being exposed, puts her at a higher risk. So in order to not get into the situation of, I'm going to have students in my classroom on campus eventually this year, she decided to transfer over to the online academy. So she's just strictly online. She's still working for the district. She's still teaching. It's just in an online environment now. Also with parents, I will go ahead and say and share a story that we have had a lot of pullouts from students within this first week of school. We're encouraging parents to drop their kid off and pick them up themselves if you don't want to risk your kid
another
catching,
thing too. There's no
catching
bus
it
services
on the bus. Yeah, and then out home on the reservation in the middle of nowhere, you're gonna take the bus because the high school is like 50, 30 miles out,
Yeah, anywhere from 10 to
a whole
20,
hour.
Yeah, 20 miles out, 30
Yeah.
minutes out, an hour out. Maybe the household doesn't have as of a reliable transportation.
Or no car.
Right, to where they rely on maybe community members, family members for, maybe those trips over into, if they're going to go into town or to do their essentials shopping. Where this push is coming from, obviously they don't have the perspective of the types of lifestyles that we have that are more common in indigenous and communities of color.
But my school it's a higher percentage of brown students than white students. And we've had parents actually make the conscious decision where they have unenrolled their students with our school, and then the next day they'll go ahead and re-enroll them at our school because they didn't like the online experience of learning. The colleague that I mentioned earlier, she said that her class sizes have tripled in numbers. There's that situation, that aspect too as well. The one thing I will say is that with the students on our campus, because we split them up into two groups, there is that space for them to actually spread out. Dismissals aren't as hectic as they used to be. It's really nice and smooth for them to actually catch their ride at the end of the day. Or if they need to get on the school bus, there literally have been like as low as like 5 or 4 students on one single bus to go home.
Okay.
We have protocols in place so far. Those we've not have had to discipline anybody for not adhering to protocol in terms of constantly having their masks on, being distant while they're waiting in line to get inside the building or to go to the next class.
Being that you and I live in an urban area, and I'm assuming your teacher that you're talking about and all that, we all live in urban areas. So we still have not only the school buses and then parent drop-offs, but then we also have city public transportation that is available. Not to mention Uber or whatever for families that can afford it.
Yeah.
Right. What about the rural areas where they don't have those options? I mean, where we're from, the last I heard that public transportation out home isn't active at this time.
Yeah.
Because the pandemic has hit hard. I'm not blaming
anyone in particular.
I'm not blaming the school in particular. I'm not blaming the district in particular. I am blaming, I guess I'm angry. My anger is placed at the people that are pushing the districts to open up when I don't believe we're ready yet. And I get that, schools, it's a business too, like any other, like hospitals, company industries, education is still a business. And that's all they're looking at. They're not looking at the people. In my opinion, they don't care about the people. Their awareness of what people can accommodate for and accomplish in their viewpoint is only one type of story.
Here's another side of the coin, though, is that we now have kids coming on campus, meaning that they now have the resources in order to check up on their well-being.
That's true.
So if a kid comes in and if I pay attention to what their body language is, working with kids after some time.
Yeah.
Listening to kids isn't always just listening to what they have to say. It's actually paying attention to their behavior, if they're interacting, not interacting with other people.
Body
so
cues.
you then do have a sense of like, hey, are you okay? You have that feeling inside you to where you feel like you do need to approach this kid and say, hey, is there anything I can help you with? That is their resource. Because again, coming back to, I know that usually from where we're from, at least our reservation, you always have family to turn to. So there's always that resource there. The community is pretty tight knit. Whereas in an urban environment, sometimes it isn't always there. We like to think it is there because, that is how the brown community operates. Everybody is a resource to one another. Everybody comes together. But you don't really know if a kid is getting adequate meals at home, if they're the ones that are having to be the adult, and if let's say their parents aren't as responsible, and so they're the ones that are having to take care of the household. Or
their parents or they're coming from single parent households where the parents have no choice but to spend extended hours at work and leave maybe the oldest sibling in charge, and they're being watched after by their grandparents
if they're there,
or another family member if it's available.
Or because we service a lower income socioeconomic class, how do we know that the parents themselves aren't going through like a depression because they lost their job recently and they're just mentally not focused on how to take care of everything at home? So there's all these situations that do come up into, is it a good thing that these kids now have access to their teachers, to, the school administrators and the workers at school, in terms of having someone to see, having someone to talk to? if
Yeah.
they need it.
Yeah.
Versus staying at home, staying in isolation, and not having any access to any of those resources.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm looking at the waiver right now.
Go ahead and read it.
I'm just gonna read some of the high points that we had to acknowledge in allowing our children to go back to school. And it says, first one is, I understand that during this COVID-19 public health emergency, I will not be permitted to enter the facility school beyond the designated drop-off and pickup area. I understand that this procedure change is for the safety of all persons present at the facility and school to limit the extent possible everyone's risk exposure.
We're not allowing parents on campuses right now because
we still know that COVID-19, it's a risk that we could still contract it to one another. I understand that in order to be at school, my child must be free from COVID-19 symptoms. If any of the following symptoms appear, my child will be separated and moved to a supervised, secure area. I will be contacted, and my child must be picked up within 1 hour of being notified. While the district understands that many of these symptoms can also be due to non-COVID related issues, we must proceed with an abundance of caution during the public health this public health emergency. And here's the thing: what about we keep hearing all these reports about asymptomatic?
Yeah, so if they display no symptoms, who's to say they still aren't carriers of it? But at the
right.
same time, I will comment on that specific clause that is mentioned, where we did have a student exhibiting a runny nose and sniffles and red eyes, and it was allergies, which is one thing that I asked. I was like, well, is the kid just having allergies? And the nurse was like, yeah, it probably is just allergies, but due to what our procedures are, any kinds of symptoms, high fever, runny noses, sneeze, excessive sneezing and coughing and stuff like that.
Right.
We have to call the parents and they have to come and get their kid. And then after that, I believe it's like a 10-day quarantine where they cannot come back on campus unless they are actually seen by a physician, which then comes at the expense of the parent. If you do have health coverage or not, it still comes at the expense of the parent to pay and to schedule and to take time out of their own work day to actually get their kid to a physician to actually sign off and have the doctor say, yes, it was allergies, it's not COVID. Then we can go ahead and let the kid back on campus. So I was like, well, flu season is upon us. We're basically going to be screwed
that
for
was another
symptoms.
thing. Yeah, you have winter coming up and everybody's getting their flu shots and all that stuff. So, and that was another thing that I told them. I said, you're getting your flu shot.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing that we have to be wary of. But again, not everybody is afforded vaccinations.
But I will
even if
come back
want
to, though, again, that those of us who do work on these campuses, we're all doing our best to come together and look at the positives more than the negatives. Yes, we're having precautions and everything like that. And there's, stuff that we probably don't agree with. We're not as vocal about it, at least to our administration, to present any confrontation.
Understandably, because it's your job.
Yeah.
And you can't go against, don't bite the hand that feeds you, basically.
Yeah, basically is really what it is.
I don't know. What in the whole waiver, though, I don't know, just reading it, they acknowledge all of these possibilities of risk.
And then there's
and then even here it says, I understand that while present at school each day, my child will be in contact with children and employees who are also at risk of community exposure. I understand that no list of restrictions, guidelines, or practices will remove the risk of exposure to COVID-19. And this says, I understand that members of family play a crucial role in keeping everyone at school safe. But then there was, down here on the letter that we have to sign, it basically states, and it goes over everything, not only does it state out the stipulations that we have to initial by. The COVID-19 has been declared a worldwide pandemic of the World Health Organization. COVID is extremely contagious and is believed to be spread mainly from person-to-person contact. As a result, federal, state, and local governments and federal and state health agencies recommend social distancing and have in many locations prohibited the congregations of groups of people. And then at the very end of the letter, it says, to the fullest extent permitted by law, I hereby agree to waive, release, and discharge any and all claims, causes of actions, damages, and rights of any kind against the school district, its insurers, the district's governing board, and all of their respective employees, agents, representatives, and volunteers arising from or relating in any way to any damage, injury, trauma, illness, loss, or death that may occur to my child, me, or my household as a result of COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay.
And then it says, I further agree to not sue the released parties, so all of those people, and to defend the
Constitution of the United States.
and the indemnity of the released parties for all claims, damages, losses, or expenses, including attorney's fees if a suit is filed concerning any injury, illness, or death to me, my child, or my household members as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic.
So you have all these situations saying that this should not be allowed, but then it's like
They
we're
know
gonna do it.
it's a risk, but guess what? This is the only way that your child can continue
receive
education with
education.
us. You either do it this way or do it that way. And like I said, usually if my son was on the regular academic schedule and he wasn't enrolled into that specific
Specialized
that
program.
specific Cambridge Academy, it would have been no brainer for me to switch over to online. No problem. But
Yeah.
with this, I don't know. It's basically, like I said, the whole tone feels really.
Condescending. Or
I feel
like,
I feel strong armed.
yeah. It's
I
abusive.
can't think of any
basically,
other
yeah.
I can't think of a better
Our
word.
way or the highway.
Right. And guess what? You can't sue us.
I will mention this too, though, for those who are really opposed to not sending their students into the academic setting, into the online or not online campuses, but onto physical campuses with other kids. But yet you still take your kid to the grocery store. You still have your kid meet with friends, and they do social things out in other people's houses. How is that different?
Well, first of all, it's in a controlled environment, and I never allow more than
What if he's going to
two
their
others,
houses?
two other people. I'm always and I trust my son because he's very honest with me, and he's earned my trust. So for the most part, he only goes to one other friend's house, and he's usually home by himself.
And
for
then we
most
have
of the
someone
day.
come over usually every now and then, like not every weekend, but
No, yeah, it's
only
very
been, what,
limited.
twice?
Yeah, it's very limited. And again, we still go through the whole hand washing thing and all of the disinfecting and all that stuff. So it's still really controlled. I mean, yes, he does have. I do allow for him to visit with select friends, but I keep it really controlled. He has to adhere to, like I said, the limitations of that. So it's not like he's having
100 other kids.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that he's passing by in the halls or in the courtyard. and
Yeah,
everything.
first of all, it's in a controlled setting that I'm well aware of. And then it's people that I know. It's just asking him every single time, are they okay? Do they have a fever? This and that, and make sure they disinfect.
I do
want to
mention too as well that for elementary schools within our district that have opened up, you're not just going to have a kid go to recess and not touch anybody and not just stay distant from one another. And it's nobody's fault that it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because there's no controlling that. That's what kids do, and naturally they're gonna play with one another.
Yeah.
So like having stuff like like if you have kids playing Foursquare, kids playing football, kids playing catch out there during recess, that still is a potential, risk for having these kids touch these playthings and sharing it amongst themselves while they're outside playing.
That's true. I don't know what the setup is at school.
Did they invite you to go onto campus to check it out? No?
No.
You didn't receive any notice or anything
No.
like that? we offered, I believe, not our returning students, but we offered new sixth graders who are entering our school the opportunity to come in that week before we were going to start up again.
And I can understand that.
Just to get a basic tour and layout, that way they know where they go.
Yeah, well, because they missed out what would be a regular freshman, or what do you call that?
Sixth grade.
Yeah, sixth
promotion,
grade.
that promoting
the tour
class.
of how the campus is going to look, where everything is, just so they get that feel. Yeah, and I get that in
and
regular,
we usually do that at the end of the years.
Yeah, at a regular school
happening.
setting, but this is different.
I guess really the gist of this discussion is just what's right, what's wrong. It's really more, of like,
I don't know,
what are your choices, I guess.
Yeah.
It's really more of that. What are my options?
You all
what
know
are my choices?
Obviously my opinions on it.
Yeah.
And my convictions on it.
Yeah. But also your privileges on it, because having the privilege to say, I want my kid to attend online classes is in fact a privilege.
That's
and I think it's something that a majority of us tend to forget. One, having the resources, which any online academy will say that will provide you with the resources. But in reality, in terms of, do you have the space in your home in order to fully
commit to the learning, to the educational
to adapt
environment,
into that type of learning environment.
Yeah.
Do you have the space for it? One, does your schedule allow for it? Do you trust leaving your kid at home by themselves if you have a 9 to 5? It's a privilege. It definitely is a privilege. And I think that's one thing why had more positives than negatives in this urban environment with our students coming back onto campus, because a lot of the homes that they do come from, it's like how we do describe in the Native community. It's siblings that are with you, not in a house, but in an apartment, which is a smaller space.
My whole frustration isn't just, because it's affecting my own son or whatever. As a whole, thinking of everybody overall, and I understand there are those household circumstances where having the children back in school is more of an ideal situation for them. I totally get that. And in normal circumstances, I would be all for it. I'm supportive of all that. My thing is, though, why not just allow those particular students, still continue allow those particular students and households that actually need to be on campus,
allow them to go.
Yeah, allow them to go and have first dibs.
But then
on the school setting, and then those of us that are afforded to be able to continue with the online model.
That's what's happening, though. But
why not?
We decided that was the option, but at the sacrifice of you no longer having your kid enrolled in the program. The online schooling was the option, but you opted to keep him in that
because again, like I said, because that's his educational goal. We already had to go through adaptation of him not going. First of all, we already had to rearrange his schedule so that it can accommodate the online, and then having to, if I disenroll him, he's no longer on the Cambridge Academy program, and then he would have to enroll into a whole new set of courses. That's not fair to him, especially when, like I said, if somebody else is pushing for everybody to go on campus, that's fine. But my whole argument with the whole thing is the freaking waivers. Making us sign the waivers, and you guys, for basically, in most circumstances, it's not a choice. It's we're being strong-armed into it. You're telling us you either come back to school or you can't continue your education with us. But guess what? You can't sue us either. So to me, it's you're making me choose to do this, or making me choose this for my son.
Or forfeit.
Basically forfeit choice, and we have no other choice but to go along with your demands, and yet you take no accountability for any possible repercussions that might come out of that forced
decision.
That forced
it's
action.
Not really a decision, it's just
that forced action.
Yeah, that's where you feel let down.
Yes. I feel betrayed.
Yeah. But then going back to what you had suggested earlier in terms of allowing those who need to, quote unquote, come back on campus, it's public education, though. So like our role as a public as a public school district, is we cannot deny anybody like access into our educational learning environment. And it becomes really like you cannot black and white the circumstances
that's
of
all
like
based
what
on normal circumstances. This has all of that stuff. It's still without a pandemic.
Yeah. But when it comes to, okay, here's the checklist of what requirements you have to meet in order to, we're saying that you're needy in order to come back on campus. You cannot black and white those circumstances because, again, it's what I had mentioned in the other previous episode. Even if COVID was not a thing, sorry, I dinged this. Even if COVID was not a thing, education isn't a one-size-fits-all. You know,
I get that.
You know, the other thing, interestingly enough, that I was listening to with my husband while we were just out going to pick up some dinner, we had NPR on the radio, and they were talking about discussing the impacts of students with disabilities and how their learning experiences were impacted. And they were interviewing, this principal, these teachers, and these parents. I'm pretty sure you've all heard of, what the whole airsoft pellet gun in the background of someone's Zoom video chat, and then they were trying to issue a school consequence because it was like having a weapon on campus, but he wasn't on campus and stuff like that. The parents are then using they're advocating that our kid is diagnosed with this letter, this acronym. But the interview basically was about how the needs for students with special needs disabilities are not being met because it's not an in-person learning environment.
Well, then in that case...
But on top of that, though, these students have a higher potential I'm just saying because I have worked in the field, I have worked in a special education classroom before, they have a higher potential of carrying these germs and everything like that because of, bodily fluids.
Well, then also like there have been reported circumstances of children like that to actually be thriving more because they're in their own controlled environments.
Not all, but yeah.
But
some
okay,
stories,
so in those particular circumstances, then I believe it is the responsibility for whatever school that they're enrolled in to push further to find resolutions to be able to overcome those barriers that the student is facing.
Wrapping up this discussion, we just want to hear from you guys. We like seeing your comments on the YouTube channel. What are your thoughts pertaining to if you have a student with a disability? If you have an elementary school student, middle school student, high school student, what are your approaches to what situation? What has your situation been, and how have you been meeting these circumstances?
Right, and we like to hear all perspectives, not only the student's perspective, but also as a parent, caregiver, guardian, or teacher, any kind of other educational professional. Just let us know how you're dealing with it because, you heard me.
The important thing that we want to say is that our stories, our perspectives aren't it's not the one way that these situations are playing out. There's different sides to it.
Right.
So yeah, we just want to hear from you guys. Thank you guys for tuning in on this episode. I know, it was... I liked how this discussion went,
And if you are watching us on YouTube, please do not forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share. And then also don't forget to follow us on our social media pages on Instagram and Facebook at Indigenous21 Media.
And you can just look for our star logo. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Thank you.